Calling this hearing to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm a District 8 City Councilor and also the Chair of the Boston City Council's Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology. Joined here today by my council colleague, Councilor Aaron Murphy at large. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. We'll be taking public testimony at the end of the hearing. So if you're here with us in the chamber, we'd ask you to sign up on the sheets near the chamber entrance. Give us your name and address or affiliation, and we'll sign you up for public testimony. If you're interested in testifying virtually, please email csit@boston.gov for the link. Again, that's csit@boston.gov. So obviously this is a hybrid hearing today, and I will also be announcing any colleagues who join us electronically. We also have been joined by Council President Ed Flynn from District 2. Today's hearing is on Docket 0272, message and order for your approval of an order to reduce the FY22 appropriation for the Reserve for Collective Bargaining by $2,016,409 to provide funding for various departments for FY22 increases contained within the collective bargaining agreements between the City of Boston and SENA, S-E-N-A. It's also on Docket 0273, message and order for a supplemental appropriation order for various departments for FY22 in the amount of $2,016,409 to cover the FY22 cost items contained within the collective bargaining agreements between the City of Boston and SENA. We're joined here today by Justin Sterrett, the Chief Financial Officer, Collector Treasurer, and Chief of Administration and Finance for the City of Boston, Jim Williamson, the Budget Director for the City of Boston, and Tammy Poost, the Director of the Office of Labor Relations. Welcome to our administration partners. With that, we will go to the administration panel for an explanation of these dockets, and then we'll turn to councilor questions. So, Chief Sterrett, you have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor, and good afternoon. And first and foremost, it's so good to be back in the INL chamber. Really exciting to be here. So as you mentioned, my name is Justin Sterrett. I'm the CFO for the city. I am joined by Jim and from the Budget Office and Tammy, who heads OLR for the city. So really thankful for them for being here. I'm here to offer testimony on the dockets before you, which you've just outlined. These are appropriations from the FY22 Collective Bargaining Reserve to different departments to fund the recently ratified and agreed to SENA contract for SENA employees at various departments. Docket 0272 and 0273 are appropriation orders for FY22 in the amount of $2,016,409. We're really excited to be here today with the first of what will hopefully be many collective bargaining contracts to come after a bit of a lull with obviously several transitions and COVID. We're excited that we are taking this first step today and look forward to be back with many more. The FY22 budget, as you probably all remember, was passed by the council and included $10 million in FY22 in aggregate to cover the cost of FY22 collective bargaining reserves. And so far, this is the first supplemental appropriation that we're making from that collective bargaining reserve. Again, hopefully of more to come. If the approval of this supplemental is put forward, the remaining balance in FY22 will be just shy of $8 million at $7.9 million. The agreement for you today is both fiscally responsible but also responsive to the needs of our workers, and we're really excited and thankful for our partners in SENA for working with us over the last 18 months on this contract, if not more, to get to where we are today. Just going to quickly touch on the high level, and I'm joined by obviously Tammy, who led those negotiations, as well as Jim, if there are any questions about the fiscal side of things, but I'll touch on the very high level. So the agreement before you today covers 3 years from October 1st, 2020 through September of 2023. The contract includes base wage increases of 2%, 1.5%, and 2% effective October of each fiscal year of the contract. And we believe that this contract is both affordable and will hopefully, as we continue to work with all of our partner unions across the city, be a base that we'll continue to work from with the rest of our partners in various unions. So with that, I will stop and see if there are any questions. And we're happy to answer it.
Great, thank you so much, Chief Sterrett. And it's just checking. So I think maybe it would be helpful because, as you say, we haven't done many of these lately, and as you alluded to, there's going to be a bunch of them. So I think for those watching at home, it might be helpful to understand that most of the City of Boston's workers are on 3-year contracts, and that most of those 3-year contracts expired over the course of the last sort of 18 months or so. And so, and maybe Chief Starrett can just sort of check. My understanding is that we kind of put a placeholder amount in the budget last year, and I think also the year prior, to kind of hold for the anticipation that agreements would be reached. And so what the dockets here are doing is they're basically taking like a portion of that reserve and actually putting it towards the agreement. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Every year we reserve for what we think is a reasonable amount that we would expect to provide to our employees depending on the fiscal year for contracts that are not settled. If a contract is settled, it's just baked into their annual budget, and that's sort of what is reflected. That comes to the council on an annual basis. But in years when we do not have a settled contract, we set up a reserve that we then draw down from accordingly. Obviously, flashback to July of 2021, we sort of take our best guess at what we believe to be a reasonable and affordable contract, and are happy to say that this will be the first of hopefully many that come through this council in order to afford that. To your first question, though, around where we are in the cycle, you're exactly right. So in FY21, so not this fiscal year, but previous fiscal year, about half of the workforce had a contract. So firefighters, teachers, some other unions had a contract for FY21. It's just sort of a symptom of when they settled their previous contract. But the vast majority of the workforce, actually all the workforce, did not have a contract in FY22. So this will, again, likely be the first of many that will come across your table, but glad to be here today to support it.
Right. And so from a sort of council fiscal perspective, because here you're drawing down against the reserve, this isn't really a new appropriation of funds. I mean, is it safe to say, I guess my expectation would be, since we're talking here about maybe 4% of the city workforce, if you do very rough math and you multiply that out, it suggests that 10 million isn't really going to cover us resolving all of our outstanding contracts, but I assume that the administration anticipates that there's going to be the opportunity to have a reserve for the coming fiscal year that will sort of cover the balance. Is that fair?
Yeah, we are, as Jim often says, we're in the throes of developing the FY23 budget, so we will definitely be back to the council with an additional reserve in FY23. What that exact amount is will sort of be dependent on what we get done between now and then. I think we're cautiously optimistic that a few more will come in before the council. A few other contracts, I should say, should come before the council between now and when we file, or at least now and when the budget is finalized in June. That will not be reflected in the reserve, but will be reflected in those departments accordingly. So definitely fair to say that there will be a reserve, most likely, but exactly how much will be a little bit dependent on who settles between now and then.
And is it safe to assume that that we're likely to be, proposing consideration of Juneteenth as a holiday sort of across the board for our city workforce?
I don't think we would
say that necessarily.
I think as my labor relations director is next to me, I think I would say for the sanctity of the negotiations, this is a bargainable item, so I think we would save it for that. With that said, this contract did include it, and expect that will be part of consideration in others going forward.
Got it.
But certainly a shared priority between the administration and I'm sure the council on reflecting it in contracts going forward.
Yes, thank you. Councilor Murphy, any questions?
No, just thank you for the explanation, and look forward to the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Great. And I'm just looking back at this. So in the case of the SENA contract and the lion's share of them, that technically these are through September of 2023. Okay.
Yeah, so it's effective October 1st, 2020. State law requires us to go no further than 3 years on contracts, so this is a full 3-year contract. And we expect, obviously, others to be similar depending on when they started. Some are up at the same time, some are up a year later, or at different times depending on when their contract was settled.
Right. Lion's share all in sync with this one except for fire and teachers, right?
Sync with the fiscal year. Some of them have different effective months. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay. And that was going to be my next question, was just, do we have any optionality to do more than 3 years, since it feels like we'll be immediately doing this again now, but it sounds like no.
So we can negotiate successor agreements at the same time. So back in, I think, the last recession, we did 2 3-year contracts in a row, but that had already gone almost the full 3 years of the first contract before it was settled. So it sort of made sense to think about it this way. While 1.5 years is certainly longer than we probably would have expected, you know, it is pretty, you know, it's still within the confines of this contract. So certainly we'll, you know, as we approach September of 2023, we'll certainly be ready to meet again with SENA and others, but it falls within the current contract right now, so we feel pretty good about it.
And I think I just want to underscore, I mean, you already said it in your opening statement, but just that this feels like obviously from the council's perspective and also from the city's perspective, the question with these contracts is always the balancing act of, are we doing right by our city workers? And is it like fiscally manageable, given the fact that we know, and Jim knows well as our budget director, that there's only so much money that comes in any given year, and we've got all of our city workforce in some sense, therefore kind of trading off against each other, but at the same time, we want to kind of lift everybody up. So I guess it's, it sounds like the administration feels like this is something that strikes that balance, that does right by the city workers, but also is something that we can comfortably afford and can afford to also see extrapolated. Is that fair?
Yeah, very fair. Again, as my labor director would tell me, we don't like to presume anything in future contracts, but we believe that this would likely be, you know, in consideration at any of those other conversations as the baseline for the wages.
Great. Okay, I think President Flynn, do you have any questions?
Yes. Thank you, Chair Bach, and thank you to the administration team that is here. Appreciate your comments and the work you're doing. So I know the increases would be 2%, 1.5, and 2%. The year 2021, 22. Somewhat concerned on the 1.5% increase. Is that all the city can afford during this time?
It's a great question, and one of the challenges with a mid-year contract is we're sort of limited within what we can offer to what we could afford. So as we think about FY23, we may have, you know, we have more flexibility to plan, whereas that middle year, that 1.5, is really bound by what was in the budget from the last year. So while we feel like it's affordable, we do feel like it's responsive to what we have available in FY21 as well, I'm sorry, FY22, as well as responsive to what the union was looking for.
The union was advocating for 1.5%?
I think in a list of all the priorities, this is where we settled, and they were obviously accepted that as a, you know, as part of the overall deal.
Okay. Doesn't seem like it's that large of an increase to me, especially with the cost of living going up. And the price of services going up 1.5% is not a lot. Is not a big increase. So are you factoring in, Justin, that the cost of living is going up as you went with the 1.5%?
Yeah, everything is part of on the table, right? So when we work with our labor partners, we come with a list of proposals, whether they're around economic measures, so wages or other types of economic incentive or language or other, you know, collective bargaining issues. And when we work with them throughout a multi-month and multi-year process in this regard, we sort of start at different numbers and we end up in a place where we're in agreement, and this is where we landed. I think we were happy to be able to do the 2 in the first year as well as the 2 next year. And again, given the sort of the confines of where we are being in the middle of the fiscal year, it's hard to do more than what you're able to without being able to plan for it like we would in future fiscal years.
I'm gonna support this. I wish it was higher. I know our city workers do a tremendous job, and I know you value them as well. The administration values them as well, but I think we could have given them something higher than 1.5%. Having said that, I'm going to support it. So Juneteenth is an official City of Boston holiday, is that correct?
It is an official state holiday and it is an official city holiday. One of the nuanced factors of collective bargaining agreements is you actually have to put that into the contract eventually. So we were happy to be able to put it into this one. And we, again, hopefully, without getting too much into other negotiations, hope to include that as part of the conversation going forward with others.
Yeah, that's something I know this body certainly supported. I would just like it, or my request is since it is a city holiday, it should just be in there automatically because it's a recognized city holiday. It's not as if workers are getting an extra day off in the contract because of Juneteenth. It is now an official City of Boston holiday, so it almost should be in there automatically. What are your thoughts, Justin?
Again, we try to stay very close to the line of not discussing things at the table that are currently under consideration because this is one of those things at the table. I think the most I could say is it's a shared priority and we look forward to having the conversation with them. We're certainly not, I think we're in agreement of the value and agreement of the importance of it and agreement that it should be as part of the conversation, but without, disrupting the sanctity of those conversations that are between the city and the unions. I wouldn't want to speculate any further.
Okay, just for the record, I think it should be in every contract automatically, since it's a City of Boston official holiday. That's my opinion only. Having said that, I'm supporting this when it comes before the body. I just want to make sure I do my due diligence as a city council. Thank you to your team.
Thank you so much, President Flynn. And just one other question from me. Presumably this number, because it's obviously very specific down to the dollar, we've already calculated and apportioned it out across the departments, because I see this unit is not representing just one department, it's across a bunch of them.
Yeah, so it's about 680 members across a variety of departments. Do it, Boston Police Department, BCYF, Public Facilities, Parks, A&F, Inspectional Services. The order is reflective of the amounts going to each of the departments.
And it's the amounts that are needed to follow the contract up through June 30th of this year, right?
Yep, through this fiscal year, and then the third year will be reflected in the upcoming budget.
Great, excellent. Do my colleagues have any further questions?
I have no further questions.
No. Okay, great. Well, I'm just going to briefly read into the record an absence letter from Councilor Ruth C. Louis-Jen, and then we'll take public testimony. This is just my moment to say that if there are members of the public who want to sign up in person, you sign up over by the door. There's a list, and if you're online, you should email csit@boston.gov. And in either event, we will look for public testimony right after I finish reading this letter, so folks who want to do that should sign up now. February 17th, 2022, Councilor Kenzie Bach, Chair, Committee on City Services and Innovation, absence for hearing on docket 0259. Dear Committee on City Services and Innovation, I regret to inform you that I will be unable to attend the Committee on City Services and Innovation hearing on docket 0272 and 0273, a hearing regarding funding for FY22 increases contained within the collective bargaining agreements between the City of Boston and SENA. I strongly support unions and collective bargaining where they can negotiate contracts with their employers to determine the terms of employment, including pay, benefits, hours, leave, job health, and safety policies for a better work-life balance. I appreciate SENA and the City of Boston, including the City Council, and hope to see other unions utilize the City Council and its platform to add transparency and accountability to these agreements. My staff will be attending, and I will thoroughly review the video, hearing minutes, and public testimony. Should you or any members of the public have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out to my office directly at 617-635-4376 or at ruthc.louisjen@boston.gov. Sincerely, Ruth C. Louis-Jen, Boston City Councilor at Large. So we thank Councilor Louis-Jen for that. And I want to thank again Councilors Flynn and Murphy for attending. And I think those are all of our questions. I certainly intend to recommend passage of these dockets at the council tomorrow. I think it's very important that we start to resolve these contracts so that our city workers can feel confident, to President Flynn's point, that those like increases that do help with the cost of living are in, and that they can see those reflected in their paychecks, and that we, you know, as we continue to go through, mindful this week of a fairly bumpy economic ride just the last few days, you know, that we keep striking that balance of making sure that our city workers are well taken care of and that we're operating within the fiscal constraints of the city, something which I think the budget office and your team, Chief Stewart, steward very well. So with that, I'll just ask if there's any public testimony. All right, seeing none, this hearing of the Boston City Council's Committee on City Services and Innovation Technology is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you.